So a few other things about the pond too is that we not only have the what feeds into it is this drainage ditch here, and what that is from is really our treated effluent and any overflow from our rainwater catchment that's in the basement. So it's fairly clean water going into there. I guess there's also runoff in the parking lot, but
in fact, what we say is it's clean water going in. They're not fairly clean.
Well, clean except for what runs off of the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're reducing that amount by having the roof gardens, because the roof gardens replace some of the land that we tore up as well, and so that absorbs some of the rain. It replaces the ground that we displaced, and so that absorbs some of the water too before it goes down into the pond.
And in your tour, then you're going to be happy to show them the roof garden a little later on the tour.
I was just filling for you because you were talking to Tony.
And you're doing it. The other thing I talk about is the location of our solar arrays, as we're here, and talk a little bit about the renewable energy and what that contributes to our power, which is not insignificant at certain times of year.
Works out to about 13,000 kilowatt hours a year.
Which is about a quarter of what our IT takes, I think.
Right.
No, the whole building prior to the addition was 85,000 kilowatt hours for the year.
Great. And
So-
how much does this contribute?
A little over 13,000.
So it contributes about 15%
Yeah.
of our total power is
Yep.
year-round is contributed
For
by those.
electricity, yeah.
Well, prior to the addition.
Prior to the addition.
It doesn't use anything. I don't let them use licenses.
We
The
don't
other
even plug
thing
in our computers.
is
We're
one of
recording.
the fun. We did a whole bunch of experiments with that in the early years. The tracking array produces about 40% more power than a non-tracking array. So that's the benefit you're getting out of tracking. The cost, however, and the cost has not changed, even though the price of panels has come down, is an extra like $5,000 or $6,000. So in terms of payback period, the 40% is pretty much a wash. That said, beyond that point, you will be producing more power, so it's, it really is going to depend on your needs. Other factors, reflected solar radiation in April, late March, April, and part of May makes up about 35% of the power that's received by those panels.
So is it a true statement to say that because of reflected light in the spring off the snow, these arrays produce more money or more energy than the manufacturer believes that they can produce?
We have exceeded their theoretical maximum a couple of times, actually several times.
And is that during March?
More in April. But normally with a panel you rate it based on 1,000 watts per meter squared, and we've had periods of 1,300 watts per meter squared hitting the panels. So, way more energy coming into the panels, and therefore it exceeds what they're supposed to be able to produce.
So what I say to folks is that if they want details on the amount produced and the actual performance and the numbers, to talk to Nathan, because he knows those numbers.
Or Bruno.
Or Bruno.
How much did you say the tracking one was more? How much more expensive?
It was right around. I think when we priced it, it was around $5,800 to $6,000 was the 2-axis tracking array additional cost. That included the transportation of it, though.
That's additional.
That's beyond what.
Beyond the normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what the point is, I think, the message to the public is that the extra expense of the tracker is really offsets the additional energy that you get. So they're really about the same. So your
really
choice.
Pick what's going to work for what your needs are.
Where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you could take that $5,000 and get the same amount of
Put
fixed
more arrays
solar.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
And
But if your site doesn't have it,
right.
then go with the tracking. You'll get the same amount out of a smaller area.
Okay.
So it's fit it to your site. If you've got the space for some more panels, they're a lot less hassle. There aren't any moving parts that are going to break down.
No maintenance.
But if you've got a smaller site, that 2-axis tracker actually will, it works out to be about the same, and and it'll keep doing that. You just may have some additional maintenance.
Cool. And then the other thing about the pond is, which was on purpose, is that the position of those arrays with the pond to the south, the idea is that you would get even some reflected light and an open look and reflected light, not just off the snow and ice, but also off the water.
One of the things about our panels actually is that we're not doing any fixed anymore, but when we were on those 4, the angle was ideal for April, and so you could see in May and June that the angle was no longer ideal for that one fixed array. And so, depending on your needs and your site, etc., on a once a month sort of basis, adjusting your angles to take better advantage of that month's, solar angle could really, allow you to capture even more. And you don't have to go the full 2-axis tracking, but you still can pick up some of those tracking array type benefits.
That's good.
How many kilowatt hours does each panel or each pole produce?
Well, the rule of thumb, this is a common question people ask, how much, especially when we talk about this, they say, well, how much solar can I make? A good rule of thumb is that for Fairbanks, this is not Anchorage, this is not Barrow, but for Fairbanks, if you've got a 1,000-watt array, I'll make 1,000 kilowatt hours a year for a place with a decent site. That means minimal shading, etc. This does a little better than that.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, but a good rule of thumb. So if someone said, "Hey," and by the way, the cost of solar right now is, if you paid someone else, so all you did was write a check, and all of a sudden you come home and there's an array in your yard. It's about, let's call it $5 a watt. So for $5,000, you get a 1,000-watt array, and that array is going to make about 1,000 kilowatt hours a year. Ballpark, but pretty good rule of thumb.
At 20 cents.
20 cents a kilowatt hour, plus the SNAP. Don't forget we have the SNAP, which is another 25 cents a kilowatt hour. Plus you get 30%
Off the top.
rebate from the government until 2016, unless they renew it, off the cost of that. So whatever, you get 30% off of the $5,000. So now you've only got whatever that is, $3,500.
So how long could I expect a 1,000-watt array in Fairbanks? How long could I expect it to pay itself off?
Oh, between 6 and 8 years.
And the life on panels, I think is 15 years.
Most of them have 25-year warranties.
Okay.
But there are some that are 40 years old and still producing.
But the definition of useful life is an interesting part of that, because the definition of useful life on a solar panel is the point at which the panel will only be 80% of its rated value of effectiveness.
Yeah.
So it still is able to produce past that. It's just
It's not 80% anymore.
that's the point at which it will drop below 80%.
Well, that's interesting.
80% of the original
Rated value.
rated value.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as solar's going on, prices seem to drop and efficiencies are going up,
Yep.
and there's so much new in the way of products.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Oh, cool. So I kind of go from that in talking about the building and the permafrost and the ramping of the permafrost and how, and I'd like to make a joke about, in 30 years or 40 years now of building homes for people, I would never recommend building on this land, but I would take public money and do it.
Oh, God.
They think that's fun.
So what is ramping the permafrost? What do you mean?
Over in the woods here, it's I believe at about 6 feet when we did our borings. At this corner of the building, it was at 12. Over here, it was 28 when we did our boring. So
Oh.
it's ramped, meaning it's running at an angle.
And there's a picture of that in the basement, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there is.
Jared's going to join us for the tour. He's a builder.
I talk about, of course, this lighting, but lighting's a whole other story. What's the point? I mean, we'd be better off with LEDs. Should we change them all out in this building? Well, you think about the waste stream and these going in the waste stream. We're better off letting them run out and then
Yeah.
replacing them with LEDs as we go.
Same with the incandescents. I mean, to replace an incandescent fixture with an LED fixture is that can be a high cost. I mean.
There are adapters. They don't all work great yet.
Yeah. And the LEDs have gotten so
Yeah, yesterday the high school students had a scavenger hunt that Vanessa put together for them, and they're running around and they're looking at all of our lights in the building addition, going, "These aren't LEDs." We gotta find a picture of we gotta take a picture of an LED light, and they're running all over the building. And I'm sitting there kind of going,
They sure
"These
look.
are all LEDs." It was cute.
They're pretty great. And those are amazing.
So one thing I say, so tell me if I'm wrong about this, but you know, if you look at an overhead picture of a view of Phoenix and you look at all the neighborhood developments, and it's like someone took down with their, you know, got out their paintbrush and just painted this beautiful picture with Fibonacci sequence type, golden ratio type figures, you know, with the perfect cul-de-sacs and every house side by side. But if you look at an overhead view of Fairbanks from space, it looks like a patchwork, like someone dropped the marbles, and there's just pieces everywhere of where houses are being built on and what land is not being built on, and which land the houses are being built on, which is not. And my response to that has been, it's because of permafrost, you know, and there's good land, there's bad land. We're building it on most of the good land we can, and there's this kind of leftover land. And so what I've been saying, tell me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, another component of this is demonstration that we're on bad land.
Well, that's why I didn't get to finish that part about why
Okay.
I took public money to build on bad land, because we wanted to show that it's possible.
Yeah.
And we can be creative. And later on, or early or later on, somewhere along the way, depending on how bored I am, I talk about our different approaches and how we ended up with this adjustable foundation. Because I think I've told you guys our original foundation, the approach was a ferro cement kind of boat sitting on this. And we designed it with a series of cells, like a honeycomb, in the superstructure underneath there. And we were also going to try to capture all our water at that point and not import any water. So we had large tanks down there, this monolithic foundation, and these little honeycombs of cells with injection points, so that if it started to list at all, we'd have this honeycomb of cells and we could inject structural slab jacking foam, and if it started to list, we could do it that way. And Jim Loftus and I worked on that initially. He was a little skeptical because of the experimental nature, and I don't know if any of you knew our architect from USDA that's involved with this, but he hated it, the idea. And I said, well, Jim, how about if we think about cabins and how we adjust the cabin, how about if we did a broad spread footer with a grade beam on top of it and a jacking column, so we could push down on one and lift the other. So the spread footer becomes like a snowshoe on the soft ground, and the grade beam is just like a beam you would have in a structure that was built above the permafrost. So then we can push down on one, lift the other, and inject in between the two. You guys know how that works. It's kind of cool.
Haven't had to use it yet. That's
Exactly.
And we haven't had to adjust it yet, but we did, and you guys may or may not have heard me say this too, that when Ed Clark did the soils analysis and the blow counts on this, he predicted that this building could settle as much as 6 inches. But we designed the foundation to adjust as much as 3 feet.
Oh wow.
So it has lots of room for adjustment. And in effect, you can add on to that jacking column that people can see down in the basement. You can add on to that and just keep pushing down. So if we started to have some catastrophic failure over here, we could really refund that. Originally, if money was no object, I wanted to have the hydraulics sort of built in computer models. So if it started to move, you just adjust it. But of course, there was no way like that. But that was in my dream mind. So. And then you're in the building, right? So you talk about lead, all the different pieces to be looking at. And then I say we're talking about solar outside, but I said, does this look like a solar unit? This right here. And it really is solar, because it does use something that the sun produces, which is biomass. So really, biomass is a battery for solar, because what it does is it takes the energy of the sun and the earth, and it creates something that you can burn and produce heat from. And then on the design of this thing, you guys have also heard me say that we wanted this place to feel like a home, you know, because we are the Housing Research Center, and the hearth is the heart of the home, and it really calls to our speaks to our ancient side, and this masonry heater is in its base a fire in a cave, you know, with thermal mass and the ability to heat up something that will store the energy. And then we talk about this, and this is where I probably go a little sideways. I talk about burning it once a day at almost 2,000 degrees. 12,000 pounds of masonry absorbs that through the baffling, and the effluent going out the chimney is between 200 and 300 degrees, and I'm not sure really what
That's
it
about
is.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that it is, because of the high combustion temperatures, it burns remarkably clean.
Yeah.
Something on the neighborhood of 10 times cleaner than a phase 2 wood stove.
That's about right.
Okay, so
Um,
I'm not
yeah.
bullshitting you.
How are these little composite guys doing? I heard that they don't burn as hot or as clean as the wood. Is that false?
I know
Uh,
David had trouble getting them started.
I've got a little of them down at my cabin at the park, and burned one down there, and it just burned forever and really warm.
With properly dried wood, and I don't know about those guys, but with properly dried wood, this thing burns really well. Mishik was getting about, I think he was getting, after all of his circumlocutions and going back and forth, about 82.5% efficient.
With dry wood.
With properly dried wood, etc. And we were going through, when we were doing it every day, which we still have for the most part, we were going through about 4,000 pounds of wood in a year, which is a bit over a cord, a bit under a cord and a half. If you look at one of these things and the efficiencies they list on them in like Europe, they'll list it at like 96% efficient. But the difference is they take out the water content and they just look at the BTU content for the remainder. And that's, they say, well, it gets 96% of the non-water content of the wood. Well, in the US, we include the water content and we say 82.5%. The two numbers are the same. It's just, we're actually saying, look, you're putting water in there too. So that's I don't know if that would be something you'd use, but that's...
Yeah, people come in here and say, well, the European ones are better, and it's like, well, no, they're not.
Right.
They're
I've
not
never heard
better.
anybody say that, have you?
Oh, well,
I have.
it was read somewhere, you know. But
Well, that's good to know.
yeah.
So you load it up with 50 pounds of wood
Tell me what?
and a shot.
It can go up to 100 hours.
Okay,
We've never
is this
cleaned
larger
it,
than
and
most
that's something
residential?
we should
Yes.
do.
Never cleaned this, you say?
I've got brushes.
Bruno, what would you say a normal residential size?
Open it up.
This is a bit larger.
There's not residential.
What would be? How big? How much
You
does
may
it
just
cost?
go up on the roof and
Size,
look.
like this is a 12,000 pound unit, 100 pounds of wood.
I have I have one, and it's for when it's $8,500 what it costs for a residential one, and I can put in probably about 60 pounds of wood in there, and otherwise performance is, it's heart of the home. It provides all the heat for us. For our house, we burned half a quart of wood with that last year. Now of course
You
that's
got your
What's the weight on
stove
your
for
unit, though?
$8,500
Wow.
with Dan Gibbons?
Dan Gibbons, yeah,
Wow.
with the with a cook stove in it,
With a
That
cook-
is
and is
really
it,
a good price.
does it have the pipes?
and with the hydronic pipe.
But you don't have the fancy rock.
We don't have the fancy. We have a parched
Oh.
concrete. So
Okay.
that if we wanted something fancier on it, it would have cost extra. But only a couple
I
thousand.
say that this is 12 to 18,000.
Okay.
This unit.
He had him at the home show, and he was listing them at $8,000 bucks. What he did with the
And that's
Uber.
competitive, very competitive with Tulikivi and its
Yeah.
local materials.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of
And
that.
and finishing it with stone versus tile is about the same cost, because if you collect your own stones.
Yeah.
Because to him, it doesn't make a difference what he's putting up there. It's
Well,
the
it's
same
a
amount
lot
of
of
labor.
work to put it's a lot more work to put stone on the child.
I asked him when we were talking about how to finish ours, and he said, if you collected the rocks, it won't make that much of a difference. So maybe that much of a difference is a couple hundred.
You know what conducts heat as well as soapstone, which is really interesting? Jade.
Huh?
Because I was talking to folks up in the Kobuk about that.
They used to mine it. Yeah,
Could
I
you
remember them
imagine a
wanting to
whole
do stone.
stove made
Wouldn't
out
that
of
be
jade?
amazing?
Wow.
Farthest north LEED platinum building in the world.
Okay.
Not any LEED
I've
building.
heard over and over again from
Because I believe even the little visitor center in
Yeah, I
Bettles
know,
is
but
LEED.
Okay.
at some level.
Oh yeah, but we're E platinum.
Right.
Right.
The Park Service did think that they had the furthest north because of their visitor center, but they cheated.
Oh.
They do cheat. The Park Service gets to have all special deals. They don't have to deal with a lot of different things. Like, they shouldn't be able to even build there. And that, you know, it's sacred ground. Infrared cameras, let's talk about those just briefly because people are curious about it. And that's kind of a lead into all our, that's kind of a lead into all our other sensors in this building, of which we said there's around 1,200. But we involve science in this, and we actually were measuring the effluent temperatures. We had those little probes, and we didn't, I don't know how much of a report we got out of it.
Still measuring the temperature.
Okay. And I thought that we got about 2 cubic feet of ash from a cord of wood. Does that sound about right?
What was that?
2 cubic feet of ash from a cord of wood.
I would say that's. We've been burning it a little less efficiently than we did back when we were
'Cause that looks
actively
like a lot of-
monitoring.
That looks
Right.
like a lot of ash.
And there's a way to set it up in there to reduce your amount of ash. How you load it determines how much ash you're going to produce. And we have not been taking the care with that since we ended our active monitoring. So we are producing more ash. Back when we were doing the active monitoring, and Mishik and Shippy were trying to come up with what is the best configuration for burning, I would say that we were actually a bit under that. We went to, during that active monitoring period, the bin in the basement, they managed to go 1.5 heating seasons before having to replace that. But since then, we've had to do it more often.
Huh.
So we've gotten away from the efficient.
But you can get as efficient as
Yeah.
1.5 cubic feet of ash per cord.
Yeah, you
Okay.
you can definitely beat the 2 cubic feet per cord if you're doing everything correctly.
I'd love to talk more on what's correct about that. Not now, but
How to correctly.
yeah, what the best configuration is.
Well, it has to do with when you lighting it so that the exhaust gas has to pass back through the flame to get out. And so if you're not doing that, you end up with more residue. And then the other thing is the vertical stacking versus horizontal stacking. Vertical stacking actually allows for better airflow through the wood, more complete combustion. There were some other fiddly bits, and we may have to talk to Mishik about those, but those are the 2 main
So
ones
we
I
may want to
remember.
get back into a protocol where we stack it, like almost make a teepee.
Yeah, David was doing the vertical stacking.
Yeah.
He was actually trying to get the hottest temperature he could. So he was watching his temperatures.
Huh. So you actually, you put in the wood like this, as
Yep.
opposed to this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Like a teepee.
Okay.
So these infrared cameras don't actually measure anything as far as heat or BTUs coming off, or can they?
They measure the temperature on the face of the rock.
Okay.
In 4 distinct points.
So that's what I tell people.
They've
So
always
from
been
that
like just
temperature,
now.
you can extrapolate the amount of BTUs that this is producing,
Roughly.
roughly.
Very
I'll defer to
roughly.
the person who's actually been doing those calculations.
Yeah, I think that was kind of where Mishik got stymied because every rock is different
Yeah.
and it became a real accuracy.
But
If
do
you
we
had-
have a pretty good idea, just from the BTUs in dried wood, how many BTUs this thing can put out at its maximum?
We probably could go, we'd have to go back to
We'd have
the
to find
record.
it in Mishik's records.
But there was a period where he was tracking the time the burn lasted, and so you had the weight of the wood that was put in, the time it took to burn it, and he was, for a period there, collecting ash out, not letting it necessarily fall through, so he had a final end weight. So you could use those numbers to come up with what was the BTU output. Now then, for the actual BTUs radiated off the surface, I don't think he ever got that far.
Okay. Well, that's probably
But it'd be your
good enough.
combustion efficiency.
But, but it's a nice segue into the fact that the most important thing is that you have, as far as heat use, a really good envelope. So if this building in the this kind of masonry heater is not new technology. The way it's laid out is more sophisticated. But the old Russian stoves in the leaky cold homes, they actually slept on the rocks. I mean, they had beds built into them. And I think Scandinavia did that too, because then you fire this thing up and you've got this warm stone, and at night the house is going to get cold because the envelope was leaky, but the rocks stay warm, so people were sleeping on them. And that's what I understand the history of these is, right?
Well, there's also a story about a Scandinavian, I forget which Scandinavian country, but basically everyone had fireplaces, and they actually deforested themselves to the point where they're running out of wood, and whatever the name of the king is, I can get you the details, mandated that, okay, you got to start burning these things. And so this is 400 years ago. And apparently, supposedly, that's what saved them from losing all their wood.
Huh.
And I looked it up on Wikipedia, so I know it's true. The other thing is, this is a good place where usually we have our snapshots and stuff out here. And
They're actually now in the library.
Okay. Well, either way, this is kind of where my reminder is to say, hey, we got really good stuff here and reports on anything you want to know about. But our website is phenomenal, and it's dynamic, and we have new stuff.
Don't have
we
to
have
say
every
that because
day.
Molly's not here.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay,
it's,
fine.
And we
Kinda
are a
sucks,
member-supported
but-
organization.
and that's the last thing is and because I usually come back here, the last thing I like to hand them is like the membership. If you guys are interested in being, a member, blah, 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 blah. So try to make sure someone walks out with a membership form.
Thank
What
you.
do I get for being a member?
Well, it's a good
You
question.
change the world.
You change, there you go.
You get sainthood. We're finding, I believe this is true, that in the winter, even in very cold weather, when this is fired up, it's providing the heat for this fairly comfortably for this 5,000 square foot administrative part of the building.
So we've never really looked at what the oil, it's an oil boiler that's
It's-
The
doing
oil
things.
use over there out of the unit that was
The FCS.
serving
Condensing
this.
boiler.
Yeah.
The which? The
Condensing
condensing, yeah,
boiler.
that's right.
Uh-huh.
Was even at the, some of the coldest temperatures in January and February, it was really not using more than about a gallon of fuel a day. It was actually a bit less.
Yeah, this is no longer heated with any oil. It's heated by heat pump, this part of the building.
Right. The condensing boiler is really just backup.
And it's actually not hooked up.
And that has got to
manually.
change. The condensing boiler is not even hooked up now?
Well, it's set up, but it's a manual switch over.
Right,
so
right.
we
So
have to
we're
make-
trying to stay totally off it. Which, when we get a new building manager in here, I want to get in there, and that Wiesmann that's running 24, not running 24 hours a day, but is capable of running 24 hours a day, is basically for 4 months a year for you guys to take showers, and that's pretty ridiculous. When we have a solar system all set up that should be working with just those 3 little arrays to provide your hot water for showers, but it's never got.
It was there
really
one
got-
time.
It didn't get commissioned to the point that it became
Well, the problem was
usable.
the propane. Somebody built a building with propane exhaust point.
But, so all you gotta do, and this was part of the deal, is Dave, let's just make sure that we take that out somewhere else or move it. But we didn't, so.
And it is part of the reason that we never hooked up, and this would be part of a tour, it's just for my own information, never hooked up the hydronic in here because Dave Mishik was really adamantly against doing hydronic heating off of masonry stoves, or masonry heaters.
Well, there was that, but there was also the fact that at the time, they were trying to do some analysis on the AFUEs for the different boilers,
Oh, and they wanted some load.
and they needed a load,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
so.
So if this building were using just oil, this 25,000 square feet, what would we predict the oil use to be per year?
I can't tell you about the expansion. The original building
About 1,200, wasn't it?
was 1 year was 2,200, the other year was 2,000 with a 4,000 pounds of wood. So that was your total space heating. And
2,000 gallons of fuel for
plus
15,000.
plus a quarter and a half over.
Around 12,000 square foot. What's this?
15,000.
15,000.
Which an interesting metric is, it's about 40,000 BTUs per square
Yep,
foot
it was
per
about
year.
42,000, I think.
And the average commercial building in Fairbanks is somewhere around 80,000 BTUs per square
At
foot.
least.
At
Because
least.
when we were looking at LEED and how we compared for the energy points, the design said that we were going to be 42% better than the conventional design, and in actual fact, we ended up 51.9% reduction over a conventional building.
The other, how that compares to residences, I think, is still somewhere, the average 5-star plus house is somewhere between 40 and 50,000.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're
BTUs
very
per square
comparable
foot.
to like John Davis's house, so.
So that, I mean, that really speaks a lot of, it's a commercial building, you know. and
Yeah, no,
we're-
I mean,
we're getting-
2,200 gallons of fuel is, honestly, there are homes in Fairbanks that go through that in a year.
Yep.
Many homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're about 59% better than most commercial buildings.
51.9.
51.9.
How are we doing, Molly?
Yeah.
Local products, local materials as much as possible. This rock is from Healy, the birch is local. This, however, is imported, unfortunately.
What is?
The
Slate.
Slate.
As is the cork that you see.
But it is recycled cork.
And cork is a renewable resource.
Yep. And you can also argue that so is rock.
You can also argue that slate is a natural resource. It's-
Absolutely.
Yeah, you
And
can't.
it's green.
And the amount of fossil fuel that it took to
Not
ship this
totally
stuff up here
basic.
we don't talk about.
It's
But
probably
he has
less
a
than the
small
CO2
business
output
building
for the
counts.
concrete. but-
That's true. Yeah.
What percent of the building do we heat with this now? Because I know it used to be like,
A third.
but a third of this.
A third of about 5,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
about a third of the entire structure.
The entire structure. Okay.
Counting the addition?
They're not counting the addition.
No.
Problem. That wouldn't be counting the
This is,
addition.
this
This
is
is
a,
not a third, if you count the addition?
5,000 square feet out of 20.
Oh, is it
24,000.
24? Oh, yeah. it's
You had
not.
it 7,500, so we'd be at 22.5, right?
Okay.
Depends on who you talk to.
Oh.
Because you can, it depends on whether you measure from the inside or the outside.
Okay.
talk about the, you know, who we are at CCHRC. Usually this is where people ask about how we're funded.
And here you have your policy mushrooms.
We have policy group,
Policy
BSRP, SNS, and we have administrative. And I mean, at least overview. That's one. And then when people ask about how we're funded,
Canine Corps.
tell me if I'm wrong. You know, try to get our operating budget from the legislature
Through Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. If you don't
Yep.
If you don't mention Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, you're in trouble.
Yep. So you guys do that, and then we try to supplement that from, you know, grants from other agencies, such as we've done projects with National Renewable Energy Laboratories,
DED,
The Denali Commission.
Denali Commission, who?
Division of Economic Development.
Yep.
So.
Permafrost Foundation. Permafrost Technology.
Department of Community and Economic Development.
No, well, but DED was the group that we specifically worked with, so they're the division under that.
I thought it was DCCED.
That's
Yeah.
the department.
Yeah.
We work for the
Yeah.
division.
Plus,
You gotta love the
we
state. They
also
have departments that
partner
have divisions.
We
that
also
have-
partner with private companies and
Yeah.
villages who have gone after grants, and we do consulting work with them. So
Yeah.
we have money that does come in that's, we're
And
not
of course,
directly
the
tied to the
federal
grant.
government through everyone from some work we've done with DOD and Department of Energy, DOE, and
Krell.
big on HUD,
Thankfully.
big on Krell.
A, B, C,
Survey
D,
with
E,
you.
F,
Thankfully,
Are we
I'm the only
part of the
person here you don't have to
university?
kill for messing
No.
with the DOD stuff. That's right.
So you guys are part of UAF, right?
Yeah, yeah, please let them know that we really like being the university's neighbor, and we picked this land because we were in close proximity, but we leased the land. We are a private, not-for-profit corporation founded by the building industry in the state of Alaska in 1999.
How would you like to be a member and support our mission?
That's right.
Because we do not get funded directly from the
You
university.
probably shouldn't get into the fact that this is actually railroad land and that the railroad's actually on university land.
And that the actual railroad
contaminated.
right-of-way goes right through the middle of this
Well,
building.
actually, saying that it's contaminated is not necessarily.
We are going to have these monitors up with the website on them.
Okay.
So that when people come in, they can go to that, and we're getting a little remote mouse so that they can navigate it without putting their finger on it. So that thing should be running like today. We were supposed to turn them on in the morning. Maybe you could get with Kristen. Well, I'll talk to Kristen.
It might not be working today because of the problems we've been having with the internet server. It might have been the fire that needs to be put out first.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
So this is our library where we have lots of reference material for folks. We are also connected to the University of Alaska's library system and have international access to libraries all over North America and elsewhere, so people can do that. We're also part of the National Association of Home Builders bookstore. You guys know that?
No.
And that they can order books through us that the National Association of Home Builders has, and encourage folks to go to their website because they've got a lot of material too. But here we are, and they're welcome to come in here and look at things. We don't have a checkout procedure.
I think we've had over 40,000 hits just on remote wall alone. You know, and that's it. We haven't got to remote wall yet, but it's like, you know, all of the stuff is free online.
Right.
You know, free.
And yeah, same with all the publications. You should point those out, and they can take a handful of those with them. But then all the materials are
That
on the
would be
website.
an interesting thing, I think, because with respect to viewing or views, I have no idea how many views our various videos have got.
We have like 250,000 views.
Yeah, but you know, which ones seem to be the most popular? That's an interesting thing to bring up. You know, hey, you know, our remote wall's gotten 40,000 views.
Yeah.
That's the most popular one that I've seen.
And the Annotated Past one has close to that.
Mhm.
And we'll have a page on the website that's basically like a YouTube channel, but we'll like recreate it so we can lay things out how we want to and make our own playlists. So just direct them to the website video page.
So, and of course, this is the place we start talking about walls because we've got that display, right? And we've
Yeah.
got all of this going on. We talk about our partnership with Siemens and the fact that we were runner-up for the smartest building in America. That's pretty cool for people to see, even though it was just a video.
Is it America or the world?
The universe.
Okay.
Actually, smartest building in America. Runner-up. So that shows the Siemens stuff, and it's always good to promote them. And then I talk about they're really not sensors; they're chipmunks that we keep in a cage because when you're over here talking, you can hear them. Then you open that.
Well, you could point out that right there, that tie-in between Campbell Scientific and Siemens, actually was a real boon for both companies because it allowed Siemens and to develop the technology to interface with other companies via this
That are doing
backbone.
monitoring.
Right, and so now instead of just producing trend points and things right there for, you know, a specific real-time sort of review by a facility manager.
Yeah.
There's now, we expanded their capability to do long-term, accurate data gathering for use by people that are after IPMVP or which is International Protocol for Measurement Verification Plan, or
You don't have to tell them that.
okay, but you know, people that are trying to do long-term tracking on their energy efficiency or trying to improve the energy efficiency of their buildings over time, Siemens systems really gained a lot of capability from this interaction here.
You know what I really like about us here? Is that we have such a variety of personalities. If you want the details, we got the detail people. If you want the overall picture, like your president who would say, the cool thing about this wall is the relative humidity of the wood studs is the same as your furniture. So if your furniture lasts 200 years, so should your wall, and that's what this system's all about. Or you could say,
AMVP, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I would say that about the wall, but you brought up the systems and your chipmunks, you know, just had to explain what the chipmunks are doing.
He says
I
it
think
before.
it's delightful. I think it's really great. I think we really complement each other. And I'm complimenting you in that respect.
Stop.